In the end, was this about custody or control? The government says Donna Adelson could not stand to lose. And when relocation was denied in the divorce of her daughter Wendy to Dan Markel, she made it Charlie's problem to fix. So the jurors now have to try to figure this out, sort it out, and unravel what the defense tried to make a mystery.
Welcome to the global phenomenon, Surviving the Survivor. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning journalist, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation? We are live in Tallahassee, coming to you from the Leon County Courthouse, where we just wrapped up closings in the case of Donna Sue Adelson versus the state of Florida, and it was a long day of closing arguments. First, Georgia Kappelman, Prosecutor of the Year, going for a lengthy amount of time, followed by a lunch break, and then Jackie Fulford, the one-time judge here in this part of Florida, who is now an attorney and a owner of a funeral home, and she put on a fairly vigorous defense with the facts that she had, trying to muddy the waters, pointing the finger at everyone but Donna Adelson. And now this entire case is in the hands of 12 jurors who are deliberating 2 floors above me inside the Leon County Courthouse. And now we welcome to the show our best guest as always. We have Court TV's Julia Janae. She's been anchoring this show for 2 hours a day, every day from the courthouse, and of course works for Court TV, and she's an attorney as well. And Betsy Burgess, she is an attorney here in Tallahassee, and of course, our MVP of this coverage, Joe Patuto, who is the patron saint of STS, and she's been covering this trial for us from beginning to end, gavel to gavel. And Prof. Joe, as it says on your screen, I'm going to start with the same question I've been starting with. And by the way, I'm set up here with a kind of an impromptu setup. If my phone goes dark, it's meaning that I will have to charge, but I'm here and we'll be here for the next couple of hours. Right now, I should let everybody know we are on verdict watch, essentially. I mean, they're going to have to pick a 4-person. They're going to have dinner brought to them by the court. But they have decided verdicts in this courtroom with this judge as late as 11:45 p.m. That's what I heard inside the media room. So they could go for a while here, and it's very possible we could get a verdict tonight. And Steve Cohen is 2 floors above me where 3G is, but we're in the middle of a hallway here in the Leon County Courthouse. So if we get a little disrupted, that is why. But Law Prof. Joe, it was a long day of closings, much longer than I expected. I'm wondering if it's longer than you expected. And what's the headline from what we heard from both sides today?
Well, from the defense side, it was a reasonable doubt closing. And she actually, at one point, at least to my ears, made a pitch to a juror to hang on it. She made some comment about, don't be persuaded by the others, stick to your guns, essentially. I actually thought her closing was better than Daniel Rashbaum's in Charlie's prosecution a couple of years ago, in part because his defense was so silly that the closing turned out to be silly. So that would be really mine. And I thought she did make a couple of points for her side. I thought on Georgia's side, her initial closing argument was really terrific. I couldn't get a sense of whether the jurors thought it went a little too long, but I think she made the point she needed to make, and she made them well, and she relates to a jury. I mean, she's folksy, and and she admits error in ways that I think is just really genuine, and I think they really liked her. Her rebuttal closing, I think, pointed out maybe 4 or 5 things that Jackie Fulford's closing overstated or misstated in the record. She could have done more, but I think she did enough to alert the jury that lawyer may not be completely credible and trustworthy. So be careful about what you believe. And then I think she went back to her theme, and I think she closed out really well.
Yeah, I got to tell you, inside the media room, people thought Jackie Fulford was doing much better than inside the gallery, which I think is interesting. And you get a better, I guess, vantage point. You get to hear more clearly. By the way, just sticking with our Fisher Price theme, I'm on a cell phone. If I get a call, it might bounce me out. So guests, stick around, and I will be right back in. I know that sounds incredibly professional. Looks like John Singer is about to enter the building. But Julia, since you only have a couple of minutes, essentially, both the government and the defense's arguments were, look, this is a meddling grandmother. It's just what they did with that meddling. One took it to the extreme, which was murder. And then Jackie Fulford made the point that a meddler is not a murderer. She's just a nosy grandmother. I thought that was somewhat effective for the defense because oftentimes mothers and grandmothers of children who are going through divorce, that's what they do. They like to meddle, they like to get involved. And we all know that family court is a very volatile place where people can say crazy things. And she listed off the curse words and various crazy names that she called Dan. And she said, but that's where it stopped. Was that effective in your opinion?
You know, I'm surprised she took that route in listing off those names again. I mean, depending on how conservative the ears of these jurors are, they already heard them during the prosecution's closing. And then to hear them in the defenses just over and over again, I was surprised, but I see the reason that she did it. She's like, this is the worst of my client. It's these ugly things that she said, but you're not going to see anything worse than this. And no one should be connected to a murder just because they called someone ugly names. So I think her style was effective. I was looking forward to seeing if she was going to be doing the closings. I know there were several people you mentioned in the media room who thought that for sure Josh Selman was going to do it because he was helping get everything set up. But I thought that she would be most effective for Donna, especially with Donna not taking the stand. I think she's somehow for this jury a conduit of protecting Donna, but also being able to come across and look, this is what it is. This is how it is. When I did get inside of the courtroom, I did feel like her tenor and the way that she said everything to the jury kept them more alert, because during Georgia's, not that they were holding it against her, but once it was getting close to the lunch break, they were getting tired. They were starting to check out a little bit. It looked like they still paid attention, and I don't think they'll hold it against her because they know this is a heavy case with a lot of information. But when those text messages started coming in, I noticed some sort of eyes glazing over when we were getting to the end of the first part. But wow, the ending of Georgia's rebuttal. I felt like she brought so much more emotion than she did during Charlie's trial. And you could almost feel that this was the moment. It's almost like all of these convictions are leading up to this moment. And that this was the defendant she probably was the most concerned about when she first heard this case, was that there could be this grandmother who would do this. So you heard that come out when she said, may you have the strength in that jury room to find her guilty.
Yeah, and I agree. That's a great point. I felt like Georgia was taking this personally. I noticed some head nods from her, kind of cocked her head when Jackie Fulford was delivering her openings. Like, I can't wait to get back up there and get my chance. And Judge Stephen Everett kind of called time on her. He had warned her, but then she asked for a sidebar and squeezed out as much time as possible. Julia has really limited time, speaking of time. So, Julia, if you have to hop off, thank you. And I'll try to get back to you if you can stick around. But John Singer coming to us from New York, New York. And John, I know you were keeping an eye on closings today. Let's just start with the 30,000-foot view. You look at this with a different eye because you do this yourself. You deliver opening statements and closing arguments quite frequently in the courtroom. What was your perspective, starting with Georgia and then Jackie?
I thought Georgia did a great job. I mean, if her skill is really in delivering opening and closing summations, especially closings, where she's able to amalgamate and marshal all of the evidence that's been adduced in such a concise and easy to understand way, I thought she was fabulous. I think at the end of the openings of her summation, before the rebuttal, I think she started to meander a little bit towards the end. And I can't fault her for that because there's a time limit, but there's so much evidence to cover and point to. So she sounded a little bit rushed towards the end, but that's just a fact that the time was running out. Her rebuttal was brilliant. It was delivered with passion. It was delivered with absolute fire. I thought it was incredible. The one criticism I have, and again, this happens to me all the time in summations, I go home and I remember, oh, I forgot to say that. She probably is kicking herself because she forgot to mention the license plate. In her rebuttal, she mentioned on 4 separate occasions during that 7-minute rebuttal, the quote, just the two of us from the bump. But she didn't go back to the 2014 calendar entry with the license plate and the VIN number. She did hit it in her opening part of her summation. She just didn't hammer it home in the rebuttal. A minor critique, but I thought she was an A+. I really did.
Yeah, and Singer, I mean, I know you do this without notes. How's
Right.
that possible? I mean, how do you? I mean, I know your brain works a little differently, and I mean that seriously in a positive way. But I mean, don't you worry about missing something like the license plate? I mean, how's it? How does your brain able to remember what not to forget?
I mean, I think that I try to do it in chronological order, like she did, and I'm just really I'm very good with dates and with facts. So but there are things that that I'll go back and say, oh, I didn't miss this point, but I missed, this specific sub point of the point. Just little things. It happens.
Uh,
I
yeah,
thought you asked about Jackie as well. I was pretty surprised. I thought she did a much better job than I anticipated. I think the bar was very low given what she's done over the last 2 weeks. I didn't think there was much from her that would lead anyone to believe that she would do a powerful closing, but she did a good job. She made mistakes. She hit Rob. She should not have hit Rob's credibility. She again went back to that point about whether or not they were besmirching Dan, and they said that the prosecution opened the door to their defense expert and defense matrimonial attorney, Wendy's lawyer, to impugn some of what Dan was doing. She shouldn't have gone back to that. I don't think she should have played the tape conversation between Donna and the bump man. I don't think that reflected well on Donna. The more I was listening to it, what Donna kept saying over and over again was, I don't know that person. She was referring to Luis Rivera. She did say a couple of times that I'm not involved, but she never once pushed back on the fact that she didn't know Katie. The whole the whole affect of her voice during that, I didn't think that was that helpful. I don't know what the rest of the panelists think, but I didn't think that that was a particularly helpful bit of evidence to accentuate for the jurors.
Yeah, I'll tell you this: when Jackie first got out there, and I was switching back and forth between the gallery and the media room, but inside the gallery, just her delivery is so quirky, and her pitch is like disruptive. But once you get past that and you kind of become immune to it, I do think, in retrospect now, she actually did a pretty good job. They avoided the extortion and basically said, look, she's a pain in the you know what. She's a not a great person, but that doesn't make you a murderer. And they're obviously using the fact that there's no absolute direct evidence. Although what Georgia did, I think, was brilliant, because Georgia actually put up a graphic Georgia said, look, there's a mountain of circumstantial using that powdered donut thing. That if you see the kid, with the powdery sugar on him, you can probably deduce who ate the donut. But she also put up the direct evidence as bullet points. And I know the jurors are going to go back and look at that. And that's literally outlining what the direct evidence is. So I thought that was really powerful. But Betsy, to you, just pick up from where John left off with Jackie Fulford. I mean, again, she didn't have much to work with, and I don't want to make it seem like, she's Johnny Cochran level. If it doesn't fit, you must have quit. But I agree with John. She did a better job than Dan Rashbaum did, and Dan is as high powered. And that's no disrespect to Dan, because they had a wacky defense there. But just your overall thoughts on Jackie, watching her deliver those closings.
Yeah, I mean, she didn't take a sleeping pill this morning. I mean, she came out guns a-blazing today, and I don't think I was really expecting that. But I thought her tone was a little much at times. But she did go through and she confronted kind of the rough parts of her case. I think that's probably why she put the names on the PowerPoint, or I should say it's like a Microsoft Word document on a screen is what she had. But I think she did that because she had to get some credibility. You have to admit some things. There's some things you have to be able to concede, and she was conceding. Look, these were horrible words. So I think that was good. There were some times I cringed a little bit, like when she said, well, she thinks y'all was born yesterday or something like that. I mean,
Yeah.
come on, we don't talk like that here. That's not,
Yeah.
it didn't seem real. I mean, I guess some people do, but not Judge Fulford, not the Judge Fulford I knew, but I thought there was a lot of, she was passionate,
Yeah.
she was passionately defending her client. She was
You know,
finally, there was a theme,
Eh,
this is a helicopter parent, not a hit job parent. This is a
Right.
meddling person, not a murdering person,
and
like
it gets
finally.
old in there. Yeah, like she gets into this whole, like, the whole folksy, like you're saying, dialect, but also I don't know how to use this projector. And it's like, you're a lawyer, you're delivering closing arguments, and I mean, I bitch about that, but I mean, she's an attorney on a kind of a world stage here. But what, with the few minutes we have left with Julia Janae, I mean, Julia is in the courtroom like I am all day. I mean, Julia, what do you make of these jurors? And I'll tell you first what I did, made of them, which was during Georgia's delivery of closings, they were physically, to me, leaning forward like this, and then during um, and we got Tim Jansen coming to the stage, but during Jackie's, they sort of started this way, but by the end were reclined back. One juror even put his leg up like this on his chair. I noticed that, sort of like, he was in a reclining position, like he had given, he already had his mind made up. But what was your take on the jurors today? And now, of course, the two alternates have been removed, so we've got 12 jurors. By the way, Julia, do you know were the two alternates the two closest to the door in the second row?
It looked like it were the two women, I believe.
Yeah,
So
two women.
that
So
would leave us
that
with
would
8
leave
men,
8 men and
4
4 women.
women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
So
what do
majority
you make of them
Belgian.
overall?
So this morning during Georgia Kappelman's closing, I did notice that split in time. So it's almost like she had an hour of them leaning in and paying attention. And then the second hour, they seemed to lean a little bit back, but not leaning back as far as they were towards the end of the defense closing. I did notice that. I was surprised. Did they take their notebooks away, Joel? You may know. I didn't see any writing at all. And I didn't know if
There,
it was even the woman in the corner who writes everything down. She wasn't writing.
that's a good point. You mean for closing specifically? Is
Yeah,
that what you're
in
saying?
closings, I didn't see any writing. I saw
You know what?
writing
I
throughout
think you're
the
right.
file,
I didn't see her.
and
She had her arms folded, so maybe
she
you're right.
did.
Maybe they did
And
take
she
away
was
the notebook.
holding her jury instructions, but I didn't see any writing, which I thought was strange. But maybe they just felt like they know all the evidence. This is the final performance by both sides, and they get told by the judge that this is not evidence. So perhaps that's what they thought. So I thought that was interesting. I did notice a man on the front row. He seemed to be very affected when Georgia would say that Dan was erased from the kids' lives, that they were using the Adelson name a month later for them, not even using Markel anymore. And that seemed to really impact him. I don't know his parental status, if he's a dad or what. Seems like a man in his maybe 40s or 50s. But that was about the most emotion I saw from these jurors. I was surprised that they didn't smirk a little more with Georgia, because she made so many quips and little witty comments during her close, and she's sarcastic, things that made me smirk sitting in the gallery. And I'd look at them to see if anyone was reacting, and really for the first part of her close, I didn't see any reaction. I don't know if they're just trying very hard to be very unbiased and not make any facial expressions. But then when she came up for her rebuttal and she was making the joke that this is long and I'm sorry and hang in there with me, then I saw them sort of break and laugh along with her. But then they buttoned back up during those arguments. So I couldn't get a read on them, but I do agree with you that I did notice them leaning almost all the way back by the end of Jackie Fulfer's closing.
Thank you so much, Julia. I'm getting a crazy crackle. I can't tell if it's coming off your audio. I know you have to run. We're going to have COE, if you can just bounce out Julia, because I thank you so much, Julia. There we go. And now we're down to 5 of us. Just let it.
Your audio sounds a little weird, or maybe it's me.
No,
It sounds weird.
it is.
Am I crackling?
Yeah, you sound weird. Can you either try to get onto Wi-Fi or maybe hop off and then hop back on? I'm gonna keep this up and just have Tim give us his take.
Tim, give us your
No
take.
one can hear you. You sound like you're underwater. Yeah.
I will bounce back.
Yep. All right, you can go. The panel has it. We're good.
I guess I missed everybody else's take. I think that count one is going to be the hardest for this jury to come through. And it's only because so much little evidence against Donna prior to the murder involvement. And I think the license plate and the tag was an important thing. I would have wanted her to show that in the rebuttal, have that up and said, here you go. Why did she have this 2 years after they were divorced? But I think the conspiracy, I think they've got enough. I think Jackie attacking Rob was a mistake. I think playing the call of Donna calling the undercover, that was a mistake. Because you hear Donna saying, oh, I love my ex-son-in-law. Clearly shows she's acting, clearly shows she's contrived, and it makes her in bad light. She called. The people that committed the crimes, they weren't calling that number. She was planned, and she called it hoping she could find out information and try to exonerate herself. Clearly, I didn't think that was a good idea.
What happened to the COA? Oh, there you go.
I'm sorry. For full disclosure, I'm also at soccer practice. So just wanted to hop in here and circle back. Obviously, today was a long day for jurors as they were absorbing, both closing arguments on both sides. But was there one key moment that you thought, okay, this is the one moment that if jurors walk away with anything, this is what they should hold on to?
Who are you directing that to?
Sorry,
John-
we'll start with Joe.
Did you take a video of me when I?
One moment that if the jurors are going to walk away with anything, they should remember. I'm not sure that I can pick one on the state's side that I would say is the one thing. On the defense side, if I were to pick one, and I agree with what both John and Tim said about what mistakes I thought she made, I would say it's her overstatement or misstatement of the testimony that Georgia was able to pick apart when she came back on rebuttal, because I think that undermined her credibility with the jury. And I think that underpinning made more difficult anything else that she said. But I'm going to have to defer to others and think about what the big thing would be on the prosecution side. I just thought it was brilliant, and I thought everything in there needed to be in there and was done well.
Did we talk about the jury instructions?
No, and
whether
that's the problem.
Consciousness of guilt was read? Because
Did you
I
find
did not
out?
hear that.
Yeah, the people on the chat uniformly said they didn't hear that instruction given.
It's not an instruction you normally give. It's a rare one. So I don't know what happened. They didn't include it, a judge, but I would have thought they had facts and evidence to prove that. The judges denied the motion in limine and said alternate theories you can argue to the jury, and jury will decide. That instruction should have been in there.
I agree.
And I didn't hear Georgia argue it at all.
What is the appellate implication of that?
Betsy, hang on one sec. Can you guys hear me now? Am I clear?
Yeah, you're good.
Better.
Okay, I'm back. So, Betsy, just stand by one moment. I just want to let everyone know we are officially on verdict watch here. I'm on the first floor of the Leon County Courthouse. They are deliberating on the third floor, courtroom 3G. We are supposed to get at least a 30-minute heads up. And Judge Stephen Everett has had verdicts reached as late as 11:45 in the evening. So there is a chance we're going to get a verdict today, but we'll be on verdict watch, and I'll have the COE correct me, but I think our verdict watch stream is live so people can stay there and chat as well. What I'm going to do right now is just kind of go through some points that Georgia made, followed by Jackie, and I'll have you guys dissect it and then also add your, your flavor and your color commentary. But essentially, Georgia Kaplan came out, and this is a direct quote: Donna micromanaged Wendy's life. Charlie is her go-to guy to get it done. And then as far as relocation motive, John Singer, these emails showed Donna urging Wendy to fight, quote unquote, fight for yourself, that giving up was not an option. Neither was losing. Now, John Singer, I mean, going back to Jackie's comments in closings that Donna was just a meddling grandmother, where do you sort of negotiate that with emails that say, have your children who are Jewish baptized and have them wear Hitler Youth uniforms? I mean, that seems to cross a line. And of course, Georgia, she did this with Charlie Adelson, said Occam's razor. Usually the simplest thing is the thing. Are the jurors going to use common sense here and say, this is a really whacked out grandmother? I mean, once you start invoking the use of Hitler Youth uniforms, does that logically take you to the next step that she could have been in on this murder?
Sure. And I think that the state did a very, very good job, both in closing and also throughout the trial, of juxtaposing the way in which Wendy and Donna were both treating this divorce and the relocation. Wendy, from the emails, appeared to have been at peace with the decision. She wasn't happy about it, but she was betwixt and between. Should she fight? Should she build a life? Is she only going through the relocation because it's going to placate her mother? Whereas Donna was full throttle. Donna wanted this relocation so desperately. She did not want to make that 8-hour drive for the next 15 years while those minor children were at home. She did not want to lose to Dan Markel. It was all about winning and never giving up. And I think Georgia did an amazing job of driving that home. It's a very easy story. I know we all know the case so well, and we've been following it for years, but the jury over the last 2 weeks had to have glommed on to the fact that this was all driven by Donna, and Donna was not taking no for an answer. And I think Georgia banged that drum really, really well today in her closing.
Yeah. Tim Jansen, and forgive me if you guys discussed this in the couple of minutes that I was trying to get back on my Fisher Price set here. But Tim, we talked about this briefly. The lesser charges, I am obviously not an attorney. All of you are, but it seemed like Georgia was maybe not quick, but didn't put up any sort of fight to not include the lesser charges. What's the legal thinking behind that? So now it's a murder one charge or nothing as it pertains to the homicide. I know there's other charges like solicitation, but what is the legal
Manslaughter,
thought process there?
I think the defense objected to it. They didn't want him in. The defense feels their strongest is that they can't be convicted of count one. And solicitate or conspiracy, I think the guideline range is like 87 months up to 30 years. Kind of what happened to Denise Williams. They threw out the first-degree murder, came back with the conspiracy, and the judge gave her 30 years. So if she gets convicted on count two, the judge can give her from 8.5 to 30 years in prison, which would be a life sentence.
Yeah. Betsy, anything to add to that? Because to me, as a layperson, and I'm a juror, really, I'm thinking that's a gamble, because if they don't get her on murder one, I mean, she probably, if she got charged with something else, it's still going to essentially be a life sentence. But is that justice? If it's just, let's say, solicitation.
Is it justice? I don't know if it's justice, but I think, it's something. And to Tim's point, look, I personally, if they get her on solicitation and it's 30 years, that's effectively a life sentence. So, as Georgia might put it, there's more than one way to skin a cat, and maybe, that is the way. I mean, I just thought George's entire opening I thought it was masterful, just the way she took us through every single step. And she pointed out things like, I mean, the big takeaway at the end, and I think she did this at Charlie's trial too, is don't let her get away with this the way she thought she was going to get away with it. Or no, it was the other way. Don't let the way she thought she'd get away with it be the way she gets away with it. I just love that line. I think it's a snappy takeaway and kind of tied it all up. Thought it was great.
I'm getting word that my voice is all over the place. Is it a little better at the moment?
It's okay now.
It was fine. Yeah.
Okay. So Joe Patuto, and let me know if it gets worse, and I'll try to find it. I think it has to do with the Verizon Wi-Fi that I had here. But Georgia, at the very end, Joe Patuto, of her closing, not the rebuttal, basically brings up the bump, and then Donna saying on the bump when they tickle the wire, just the two of us, which then Georgia takes just the two of us and says to the jurors, that is a confession. And if anyone argues with you in that deliberation room, get to the bottom of why they say that's not a confession. Is that a good tactic? It's like calling a bluff.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I don't know that I'd say it was good or bad, but I did find it very interesting that she was challenging them to take on a juror who might have a different point of view. I don't know that I would have done it. And it almost suggested to me that she thought there might be someone who was inclined to be persuaded by some of the picky of, details that the defense went into. But she's an experienced trial lawyer, and she's got a sense of that jury. And I will trust her that she thought that was precisely the right thing to do.
And John Singer, what about the use of these demonstratives? I mean, Georgia started with a photo of Dan and literally uses the Hebrew word for father, which is Abba, and says, he was a law professor, he was this, he was that, went to Harvard. But at the end of the day, he was an Abba, a father. I thought that was really powerful. I just, I happen to know what that word is, and it was pretty clear what it was. I just don't know how effective that was. So the use of casting him as a father, but also the use of these demonstratives throughout the closing argument, I thought was really effective.
I agree, and I think one thing about the bringing up Dan Markel and the children, which she did again in the rebuttal, was that Donna always thinks she knows what's best, and I think she gave Donna a little bit too much credit here, where she said that Donna may have thought that what she was doing was in the best interest of Wendy and the children. She may have had that honest belief, but at the end of the day, it was a fatal error because she evaporated the children's father. Which obviously was not in their best interest. But I think, again, I think she gave Donna a little bit too much credit there. I think Donna did what was in Donna's best interest. I had thought from the very beginning, from when I first became aware of this story, that this was all done to mollify Donna. It was done because Charlie is so beholden to her, and it was all what Donna wanted. I think Wendy was vacillating. Wendy eventually, I think, learned about what was happening, and she took some affirmative steps to make sure that it was effectuated. But at the beginning of this plot, if you will, it was Donna. Donna was haranguing Charlie to fix the problem, and Georgia was calling Charlie today. She didn't call him the fixer. She called him the problem solver, and that's what he was, and that's what he did. But I thought that Georgia has a very, very persuasive and compelling way about speaking to a jury. It doesn't come across, obviously, when she's cross-examining a witness, but when she's speaking directly to a jury, she's incredibly articulate, incredibly powerful, whereas Jackie isn't. She might be a wonderful person to have a beer with, but she's not per se likable. At least to me. Maybe the jurors were embracing her. Betsy, I think you said you've had cases before her, and maybe she was a wonderful person to try a case in front of or not. I don't know. But she tries to ingratiate herself to a jury, and it comes across as fake and it comes across as forced, and it comes across ultimately as unlikable. That's my opinion.
Very good description.
Tim,
Yeah,
Tim, let everyone know your thoughts on the jurors. I'm
you're breaking up
gonna be in
again.
position 'cause I can tell them that again.
Can't hear a word
But
saying.
jurors, and I'll be right back. Tim, you're the host of the show.
Okay, I'm the host of the show.
Facilitate.
Yeah, I saw it. Her presentation took away a lot from Jackie's performance because she's not likable. She came across screaming the whole time. It's one thing to every once in a while get loud and then maybe get soft and show some things. But the screaming, the whole first part was just condescending. I could see the jurors backing up like this is a crazy woman just screaming. She had some good points to make. Georgia's really, really good. Their graphics were incredible. I really liked their graphics, how they showed the relationship, the time frame. They showed, and I think they really in the graphics showed me that the birthday part, the birthday gift was going to be the murder because they showed a graphic of Charlie talking to his mom after the killers could not get it done. I'm still working on the birthday present. That was so overpowering that that is the birthday present.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
I thought that was really well done.
You know, one thing that struck me was at the very beginning of Georgia's opening, she addressed the defense lawyer for the matrimonial attorney for Wendy, and then the defense expert. You could see, obviously, it was very apparent yesterday how much disdain she had for them, and I'm sure we all as lawyers felt the same level of disdain for at least the expert. But she immediately started eviscerating both of them at the very inception of her closing argument, which just told me that she was really offended by both of those witnesses, especially the expert.
She did such a great job on the cross also with that. Yeah, and that's the other thing that's one of the things I could not understand about Jackie's closing. Why she went back to embrace one, gee, all this was amicable, everybody was copacetic, and two, to say, and it was done. The relocation was done, which shouts to me, yeah, it was done. You're never going to get it by a judge, so of course you're going to go out and find an extra legal way to get it done. I thought that was a remarkably bad argument to make, and to focus on it in her closing was inexplicable to me today.
Yeah, I agree.
And it gave Georgia an opening to talk about non-negotiable, that word that from the email that Donna used. Non-negotiable indeed. You know, she got what she wanted.
You know, Georgia spent 45 minutes of her opening on the divorce. 45 minutes on that. Now, she did attack the defense and undermine their statements, but she spent a lot of time on that divorce to show motive. Hey, Stephen, how are you? Okay, we can't hear you, Steve. Are you muted?
Sorry about that. I was muted.
There was a question about Stephen about Jackie Fulford, her performance. Did you see it?
I saw a good bit of it. I didn't see the whole thing. And first of all, what do they really have to work with? I mean, if we're just being honest with ourselves, what do they really have to work with? But I kind of agree. The tone I thought was off. And for me, it hit real flat when she would say, "It's unbelievable we're sitting here." That didn't move me at all. It moved me the opposite direction. I mean, it's one thing to come in and say they haven't proven their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay. And at best, that was what they could try to do here and try to accomplish. But to come in and act like it's an outrage that anybody suspects that Donna Adelson had anything to do with the murder of Dan Markel was just preposterous to me. And so that was, of the things I saw, that was the part that I liked the least. I thought she was going through the evidence, the pieces of evidence, and trying to poke holes in it, and the timeline and all that. I mean, I thought, what else could she do? I thought she was doing well there, but I agree with you on the tone. And unfortunately I didn't get to see Georgia's rebuttal, so I don't know how that was, but.
And Stephen Webster, hi, this is Ileana. This is the COE, Joel's wife. Joel's having some phone issues, so I'm popping in. I wanted to talk to you about, some of the previous witnesses who were talking about Dan Markel through the divorce. Obviously, a lot of people knew that you were on the witness list, and we had anticipated that you may or may not be called And during that time, when the defense brought their witnesses and they were discussing Dan Markel, at any point were you surprised that you were not brought on as a witness? And what was your take through all of that? Because I know a lot of people watching the trial found it to be very offensive and much harsher than they had expected.
So I didn't watch the trial because I was still under subpoena. And even as of yesterday morning, there was some talk that I still may be called in rebuttal. And so it wasn't until after they let me know last night there would be no rebuttal. About 4:30, I did speak to my wife because my wife had watched, I think, a good bit of yesterday. My wife's an attorney as well, and my wife was incensed about apparently, I guess it was Miss Bailey's testimony. And my wife said that it even got Georgia riled up, which is hard to do. I mean, Georgia's pretty even keeled. I think y'all all know that by now. Frankly, I think she's at her best when she's fired up. So I'm glad to hear she was fired up because I'm sure that it was effective. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm kind of surprised. My wife said, you know, she thought for sure they were going to call me to try to push back on some of that stuff. But, you know, sometimes that testimony, if it's as preposterous as it sounds like it probably was, maybe it's best just to leave it alone and just, you know, leave them looking foolish and desperate for calling people to come in and testify that divorces really aren't all that emotional and, you know, whatever. And I think my wife told me that she also had said that this was not a contentious divorce. And I don't know. I mean, I think when your brother hires hitmen to kill your ex, for me, that kind of puts it over the contentious line from where I sit, at least.
Yeah, I'm back, at least temporarily. We'll see how long this lasts, but shout out to Stephen Webster. Webster, I had the privilege of driving by your office, and I actually put it out on Instagram. You've got a sign out there that says justice for Dan. This for you is so much more than just a trial. For those who don't know you, I mean, I know you had some personal things happen in your life that affected you, that made you become, or wanted you, you know, made you inclined to become an attorney. But then also your relationship with Dan. Just speak to that for a minute.
Yeah, so I had a friend who was charged with a crime. I used to pour concrete for a living. I had a friend who was charged with a crime he didn't commit, and I was going back to school at night, and he was a really good kid. And it was just gross what the prosecutors did to him. And it languished for about 2 years. Took my last night class on a Thursday night. They were picking his jury on a Friday morning. Didn't have a cell phone, got off work around 3, called and found out that the judge had dismissed his case. I know now how that played out. They clearly filed a motion to dismiss, and they squeezed him right until the very end to see if he would take a plea, and he wouldn't. Anyway, that night I went to his celebration party, and his public defenders were younger than me. And they came over to give me a hug, and I said, I'm applying to law school. And he was like, what are you talking about? And I said, if I could do for one person what those people did for you, then it'd be a life worth living. He said, well, good luck. So went to FSU a little bit later in life, and started in 2002 and at FSU Law School. And I can tell your viewers, you know, this is important for me. When I was in law school, by the time I came to law school, you know, all the lawyer jokes had been told 1,000 times. And it was clear to me that law schools were making a very concerted effort to stress professionalism and ethics. And so I worked at the state attorney's office a couple of years, went to work for a white collar criminal defense attorney that Tim has worked with many, many times over the years. Then I went to work for a guy who had kind of a general practice, and was a brilliant man, worked with him for quite a few years, but he had no life. I mean, Sundays, he'd call me at 2 a.m. on a Sunday with work questions, and Tim knows who I'm talking about. Fantastic lawyer, brilliant man, but my wife finally gave me an ultimatum. She was like, it's the job or it's the job. And I was like, okay, the job is gone, and started my own firm, and was, you know, like probably most small businesses when they first start, was pretty scared. And a friend of mine called me, it wasn't long after I had my firm going, and said that he had a case for me. And I'd done some pro bono family law stuff. I actually tried a pro bono family law case against Linda Bailey one time. I won. But but I had no real inclination to do family law. You know, litigation, I know Tim probably would back me up on this. I'm sure John probably would. You know, it's kind of a zero-sum game, and it's, you know, you kind of have to, you can't pull any punches. You have to kind of go for the gusto. And when children are involved, I just didn't like the prospect of kind of fighting like that when children were involved. So I kind of shied away from really taking on any family law cases. And my father-in-law, I worked with my father-in-law, and he was kind enough to let me do his pro bono family law cases when they came in, when the Tallahassee Bar Association sent them to him. He was kind enough to let me do those, which was how I went up against Miss Bailey. But so my friend called me and told me that he had a case that he thought I would kind of be the perfect person for. And I think he knew, you know, me representing a law professor would offer probably real esteem to my fledgling firm. So, you know, I told him, well, you know, Tor, I don't do family law. And he said, you don't have to worry about it. He's a law professor. He'll teach you everything you need to know. I said, well, that's probably a good thing. So I said, well, you know, I'll meet with him. And so I read all of the pleadings. We were going to have coffee on Tennessee Street. And I decided I was not going to take the case. It seemed to me as if the litigants were drafting the papers more so than the lawyers. I don't want to practice that way. Two, the idea of representing a law professor who was accused of contempt and was pointing the finger back in the other direction was not a prospect that was very appealing to me. You know, I quote my fees on how much I'm going to stress over your case. That's literally how I quote fees. And the idea of seeing a law professor possibly get disbarred and almost certainly face the prospect of losing his job as a law professor, given the stress on ethics that law schools have, and we're hammering all of the students. If all of a sudden their law professors are held in contempt or dinged for, you know, submitting fraudulent pleadings, I was like, that's just not something I want to be affiliated with. But I went to meet with him anyway because I told him I would, and I just really liked him. I walked in immediately. He wasn't anything like I thought he was going to be. He was very approachable, down to earth, had a good sense of humor, and we sat there for quite a few hours and probably spent half the time just talking like humans, not about law. And he convinced me that he was on the right side of history and that he was going to be able to establish that Wendy had indeed concealed assets and committed fraud. And then kind of given, for me, what moved me was his main concern was what he believed was the alienation of his children. And when I heard that, and I knew it wasn't about money, that was a big game changer for me too, because going in there just to fight for money with children in the mix and all that, I mean, it's just kind of just unpalatable to me. But if you're fighting because you feel like people on the other side are hurting your children or trying to estrange you from your children, which is what Danny was fighting for. He was fighting for children, not money. And Wendy was the exact opposite. They wanted money, period. I said, you know what? This is a fight I can get behind. And so I decided I was going to work with him. And we had to, it was my strategy that we needed to send requests for admissions to Wendy. He had absolute dead bang proof that she had committed fraud in her financial disclosures. And I was like, look, we're going to give her a chance to either come clean. Well, I'm going to ask her to admit you committed fraud. And if she denies it, she'll just be guilty of committing a second act of fraud. And that was kind of my strategy with him. But I told him, I said, look, man, if I file this, even if she zigs or zags, it doesn't really matter at that point, because one way or the other, she's going to be on the hook for fraud. And it could have real dire consequences on her ability to practice law and to work, and on your children. And if we have to do it, we have to do it. But I really feel like I owe it to your children to at least go try to talk to her lawyer and see if we can't figure out some way to resolve this short of full on, conflagration. And met with her lawyer. And he's a very, very, very reputable lawyer here in town. Been around a long, long time, tried a bunch of cases. and I'd worked with him on some white collar stuff in the past, so I knew him. And he kind of poo-pooed what I was saying. And I just finally told him, I said, hey, look, Jimmy, you know, my conscience is clear. And Tim's laughing. He knows.
I mean, Jimmy.
And he's a great lawyer. And Jimmy's kind of got a shtick. He can kind of all shucks you and like, oh, Steve, oh man, I don't know. Well, oh, I think you're just going a little bit overboard here, you know, kind of like that or whatever. And I know Jimmy, and that's kind of a routine that he has, but that's not really, he's a very bright man. And when you're kind of in normal mode. And I said, look, my conscience is clear. I did what I came here to do. If we, you know, can find some old school resolution for this, I feel like we owe it to our clients to try. And if we can't, then so be it. That's the only time in my career as a lawyer that I've ever gone to another lawyer's office and tried to broker a deal. For me, it could be perceived as a sign of weakness. And so it's not something I would normally ever entertain. But I felt so strongly about the fact that if this went forward with this litigation, that it was going to be so damaging to Wendy that I just had no choice but to take the risk of looking weak. And so I turned around and was walking out of his office, and I'd reached down and grabbed his doorknob, and I could still see it in my mind's eye. And he said, Stephen, I know what you're trying to do. And it was like, for the first time, he wasn't all shucks at me. He said, Stephen, I know what you're trying to do, and I appreciate it. And I turned around, looked back at him, and I said, well, Jimmy, you know, if I feel like I owe it to your client to at least give her this chance to see if we can't find common ground. I said, but if I haven't heard from her or you on July 18th, I'm going to file something. And when I file it, I feel like there's going to be no going back. And he said, I understand. And I never heard back from them. And that was on June 24th. And July 18th was a Friday. And so I told Danny, you know, that was our deadline, and told Jimmy that was when I was going to file it. I didn't tell him what I was going to file, but I just told him. And Thursday night, my wife and I and our kids, we were traveling to a baseball tournament in South Haven, Mississippi, up by Memphis. And so I drafted the request for admissions on Thursday, kind of went over them with Dan Thursday night. And the plan was we were going to talk the next morning to finalize them for filing. And I had told Dan that I was convinced that he was still seeing Wendy intermittently. And I told him, I said, that's got to stop. If I find out you're hanging around her, I'm going to be out. I'm going to get off this case, because I had genuine concerns that she might accuse him of like hitting her, kicking her, slapping her, try to get an injunction against him, and then use that as a tactical advantage to try to leverage her move with the children back down to Miami. And I know the lawyers here know that they've seen those family law cases that trickle over into criminal court. And so Friday morning, he called me. I was in the central time zone. We had stopped in Hoover, Alabama. And it was 8 a.m. my time. My children were jumping on the beds. I was like, I can't do this right now, Dan. I'll call you back. Let me get the children fed and get on the road, and I'll call you back at 11 my time. And as we were driving down the highway, and I was just about to call him, my wife decided that she needed to make a stop at a mall. And so I
imagine that.
Totally random. So I Googled, and I found there was a nice mall about 15 minutes away. And I said, well, actually, that's perfect, because you can take the kids inside, and I'll get on the phone with Dan and stay in the truck, and I'll have privacy, and we'll go over these and get them filed, because they were ready pretty much to be filed. And, you know, kind of going back to the duty to keep your client informed, you know, I mean, I wanted to make sure he had a chance to look at them, and he was satisfied. So I called him, I believe it was at, it would have been a 12:18 Tallahassee time, Eastern. So I guess he had probably been shot about, I don't know, 25 minutes prior, and maybe 30. He didn't answer, which I thought was really weird, because Dan would always answer my calls. We talked a lot, and even if he was with the children, he would still answer my call. He would say, "I'm with the boys, I'll call you back," and hang up. So I thought it was weird, and I hadn't heard from him, and it was probably 3:30 or so Tallahassee time, or 2:30, 3. And I was starting to actually get frustrated because I was starting to think that he was getting cold feet about filing. And I'd already told the lawyer it was going to happen. So I was starting to get a little bit frustrated with Dan, thinking that probably Wendy had called him and kind of beguiled him or whatever, or cajoled him or whatever, manipulated him. And my phone rang, and it was a police officer here in town that I've worked with in the past. I know. And it's not unusual for some of my former clients just to call me on random things. And so I answered, and I said, "Hey, you know, what's going on?" And she said, "How do you know Dan Markel?" And I said, "What?" And she said, "How do you know Dan Markel?" And I was like, "What in the world is happening right now?" And then it dawned on me that she was in violent crimes. And so I concluded that Wendy had accused Dan of battery or something like that. And that's where my mind went. So I went into lawyer mode, and I said, "He's my client. I'm going to talk to him right now." And she said, "You can't." And I said, "I can," which isn't necessarily 100% true, but I said, "Yes, I can. I represent him right now. I have an active case, active representation. I want to talk to my client right now." And that part was true, but it was a different case. So she doesn't necessarily have to, I don't represent him on that one. Anyway, she responded and she said, "You can't, because something really bad has happened." And I know it sounds crazy, but at that very moment, I knew they had murdered him. I knew they killed him. And I never once had that crossed my mind before. But just something came over me. And so that was kind of my backstory and how this 11-year-plus-year odyssey started for me.
Wow, that's an unbelievable story. I hope everyone's hearing me right. Ironically, John Singer and I, we were pouring concrete together. We had our own company, and John decided to go back to law school, and I went into media, and the rest of it stays history. I live in a studio, and John lives in the Hamptons part of the year. John Singer. So, Linda Bailey, not to make light of your story there, Webster, and I love Webster, man. He wears his heart on his sleeve. But this attorney yesterday sort of, I think it's fair to say, rubbed you the wrong way, John Singer. Explain, I guess, where that came from viscerally. You know, you're a super nice guy, very amiable, but you were none too pleased with that testimony. Also, real quick, Tim, my phone goes out. You're the new host of this show.
Okay.
It just goes to show you how important I am. I can just walk right away, and we'll go for a little bit longer, but we're going to be on verdict watch. And if we get a verdict tonight, we're going to bring it to you live. And that chat remains open for people to talk. But I've got other questions, and we'll get to Joe, we'll get to Betsy, we'll get back to Tim. But we'll now go around the horn. So, John, Linda Bailey, this divorce attorney, got up there to say that divorce isn't so bad, not a big deal. What do you make of her?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you have to compare and contrast her role to that of Wendy's matrimonial attorney, who had to be there. She was a fact witness. She had no choice. She was accused of some pretty horrific things by Dan, right, in his papers. He tried to perhaps pull her bar license, accused her of conspiring with Wendy to commit fraud. So she had to be there, and you know, she wasn't likable because we're all on the other side of the case, and we all want justice to prevail. So we're not going to like defense witnesses. But the expert had a choice, right? She made a conscious decision to be a mercenary and to get paid and to say things that had no credibility. Experts lose credibility if they can't concede to the obvious points, and she was refusing to do so. She refused to concede that it was an acrimonious divorce. She refused to concede that $80,000 was a robust sum of money. She refused to concede the most obvious points. And experts, the good ones, are ones who are, you know, they get up and they state a position or state their opinion, but they give on things that they have to give on. This person was so intransigent the whole time that she had lost credibility from the get-go. When you saw Georgia, again, really, really angry with her, and carried that anger over to today when she really attacked her at the very beginning of her closing remarks. So
Mhm.
I found her to be the most detestable witness. She did the impossible. She was more detestable than Wendy was. And Wendy has always been witness number one for hatred. This Wendy, of course, was more chastened. She wasn't as aggressive. She wasn't as arrogant. She was definitely humbled. And Bailey made her look like a pleasant person. That's how bad she was.
Wow. Joe Patuto, you're the professor. These jurors are sitting in there. And, obviously, again, I brought it up earlier. You've got the direct versus circumstantial evidence. But if you're jurors, how do you get from this overbearing Jewish mother speaking in code to being part of the conspiracy? Is it just the cumulative nature of the circumstantial and some of the direct evidence? Is it one specific thing? I mean, Jackie was underscoring the fact that, you never heard her say, I want Dan Markel killed. Georgia made the point that you don't have to hear that. So if you're these jurors, how do you get from point A to point B with this conspiracy?
Well, I do think that once you decide she's a detestable, overbearing mother who wants her way, and when she doesn't get her way, is willing to do things, you're 2/3 of the way there, because you now are inclined to look at the circumstantial evidence that from which inferences might be drawn, or in 2 or 3 ways, in a way that's most favorable to the state's case. There were a couple of pieces of evidence. We talked about the license, the stopping at Charlie's house the night of the murder, and this silly claim. I mean, I thought Georgia on rebuttal was wonderful on that. So according to the defense, at the house doesn't mean at the house. It seemed to mean at the house to me, but maybe there is another way to read it. I mean, there was not there. Once you acknowledge the relationship, and the case is made clearly that Charlie finds the hitman through Katie and does the hit, I don't think it's a big leap to get to Donna's relationship with Charlie involving her in it. And then I don't think you need that much more. I think the money, if the jury believes that she stopped at that house to drop off money, then it's murder one. She's paying in advance of the murder. You've got all the other stuff. I don't think it would be hard for them to get there. If the jury believes that the payments made, that the checks for $3,000 were payments for the murder, again, I think they're there. So again, once you don't like her, once you see that, once the jury concludes that she's the kind of person she is, then I think it's not a big leap to see them try to find the little pieces of evidence that get them to the conclusion that she's culpable.
Yeah, just huge shout out to everybody real quick while my audio is not cutting out. The COE Space Coast is doing an unbelievable job up early in the morning. You've got Steve Cohen upstairs right now booking guests, and also post verdict. So we have guests into next week. So I know people are going to want to continue to discuss this. And then you've got John Singer, one of the brightest legal minds, Joe Patuto, another amazing legal scholar, Betsy, Tim Jansen, he can't go 5 feet with in Tallahassee, and then Stephen Webster wears his heart on his sleeve. But Betsy, would you be surprised if we don't get a question from these jurors to the judge soon? And I was asking Tim, what kind of leeway does the judge have? What is a judge allowed to offer up without crossing the line into some sort of advocate or something other than that?
So your question is, how likely do I think the jury might have a question?
Well, I asked a couple questions. The first question is, how soon do you think we get a jury? How soon do we get a question from these jurors, and what is Judge Everett allowed to tell them and not allowed to tell them?
Well, I have no idea when they'll come up with a question, or even if they'll have one. They don't always. But what the judge has to do is honor any motions in limine, any evidentiary motions that have been filed and ruled upon, and not offer any information outside of the evidence. Many times when jurors have questions, the judge will simply say, you have your jury instructions, you've seen the evidence. I can't answer that question because it's something that's outside the evidence that we're not allowed to talk about. So, yeah, I mean, that's the only limitation he has.
Yeah. And Tim, let's go around the horn on this one. Right now, what do you think's the most, if you had to choose, like the singular most damaging piece of evidence against Donna, that the jurors are going to pour over? What do you think it is right now?
Well, I think the conversation on the code after the bump is really damaging. It is tantamount to a confession. It deals with the two of us. She's talking in code. You wouldn't need to talk to code to anybody extorting you. She's talking in code because she thinks it's law enforcement. And I think that's very damaging. I thought her having the vehicle and the tag is very damaging. I mean, there's so many things she did that are very damaging, that I think that a juror can say, yeah, she was involved, she participated. And then saying, and she confirms what Katie says, I'm outside. Charlie said I was getting the money. I'm outside. Corbett puts her right near the neighborhood, close to it. He timed it. I mean, it's corroborated, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's very damaging.
What do you
And let me
make
say this,
of like
Joel.
what do you make of the hour and 8 minutes, where there's that gap of time? Because even in Charlie's testimony in his own trial, he's like, oh, they were just passing by and I wasn't home yet. But do you think they, decided to all turn their phones off for that hour and 8 minutes while they were figuring things out?
Maybe they did turn them off. Maybe because they did a lot of stuff, like they're amateur criminals. Maybe they turned them off. They were passing the money, getting the money back and forth, and then going on their way. I did want to give it an update. I did a little research on this jury instruction. Apparently, the Supreme Court now says that you do not give that instruction on consciousness of guilt because it puts the judge in the position of commenting on the evidence. So now they don't give that instruction.
Huh.
So they don't give that instruction. That was a 1992 case. And that's state law. I don't think that's certainly not federal law. So that's why we didn't hear it.
That's interesting. Webster, to you, I mean, in your opinion, right now, what is the most damaging piece of evidence that Donna has to deal with?
So I didn't get to watch the whole trial, but I did watch parts of George's closing today. And I wanted to echo what Tim said earlier. I saw that text message where I guess, Sigfredo and Lewis had come up here and had not succeeded in that June attempt. And Charlie had texted his mother words to the effect of, still working on Dad's birthday present. And then Donna's response, I have faith you're going to come through, I believe is what she said. And I was shocked when I read that. I was like, wow. I mean, to me, that's like Tim said, I mean, you speak in code because you don't speak in code because you're worried gangsters are tapping your phones. You speak in code because you think law enforcement might be tapping your phone. And why would they care if law enforcement, I mean, if law enforcement was really doing that, then they're going to find out they're being extorted. Worst case scenario. So I thought that was damning. And I heard, that there was a handwritten script that apparently Donna had prepared for an inmate. I'm not clear if that was stipulated to. It was her handwriting or if it was, conclusively established. I just don't know how you come back from that with everything else that we have. I mean, now you're trying to bribe witnesses to offer perjured testimony, and I'm going to tell you, it's a little bit troubling for me too, because I mean, how does that work? Does she take that script and hand it to her attorneys and say, hey, call Adrena or whoever her name is to the stand, and she's going to, this is the testimony she's prepared to offer. I mean, if I were an attorney, my hair on the back of my neck would stand up if my client came to me and handed me something like that. So anyhow, like Tim said, for me, that text message today was something I was unaware of, and I just thought that was damning.
John Singer, is that the singular worst piece of evidence, that script that is the expert for the government said that they didn't say with a probability or a chance percentage wise if that is Donna Adelson, that expert said that is Donna's handwriting. Is that the most damning piece of evidence?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's a powerful piece, but I think the one good thing the defense did was that they did neutralize to a certain extent the jailhouse informants, and they created a lot of confusion around them, which is not hard to do when you're dealing with people who have 27 convictions and the other person had her issues. But I think what Georgia said, which was extremely powerful in her closing, was death by 1,000 cuts. That's what this is. It's an amalgamation of evidence, and it's a commonsensical argument that the one person who had the greatest incentive in having Dan Markel killed was Donna Adelson. Because Wendy's emails, like her or hate her, connote to some degree that she was making peace. As abhorrent as it was for her to stay in Tallahassee, she wasn't all in on fighting it at one point in time. And Charlie didn't care. And Georgia said it in her closing. She said Charlie cared about girls and go-karts and boats and whatever other inane things that he cared about. Donna cared. So it's death by 1,000 cuts juxtaposed with the clear motive she had. And I think that's going to be the death knell for her. Stephen, I think you had testified in the last trial. So I don't know how closely you were following it, but that email, that June 7th email about Charlie and the birthday gift and you coming through for me always, that had been introduced in the last trial. And that was an aha moment for me. When I saw that, it was 3 days after the aborted first trip to Tallahassee that the killers took. It was clear as day that she was referring to the murder as the birthday gift. And Donna was clearly giving her assent to it. To me, that was clear.
3 days after. I didn't know the timeline because they've had me under
exactly. You're a witness, yeah.
I've had to try to come back and watch some things piecemeal, and wow, I didn't know it was 3 days after. That's even worse. I mean, look, it's all the bump, the money, I'm outside of your house, one thing after another. But for me, having never seen that message before, when Georgia put it up in her closing, I was like 10. I just was like, holy cow! I mean, come on.
Joel, you know what I think one of the most powerful point the defense made today, though, in their closing?
Yeah.
Was they were talking about how from the time of the bump or even the time of the murder, it took 9 years from the time of the murder to arrest Donna. It took 7 years from the time of the bump. And that's sort of what got everybody here who was following it outraged that none of the Adelsons had been charged. But I think they did a good job, the defense did in their closing, with talking about how after thousands of emails and hundreds upon hundreds of taped phone calls, it took all that time to arrest her. And it came on the heels of this discussion about Vietnam, meaning they didn't really have the goods on her. Mm-hmm. And after all that forensic work that they admitted they did, I thought that was, and we know, all of us, that it was a sequential moving down in the train, right? They were going one by one by one. But for the jurors, I think that may be a resonant point. I don't know what the rest of the panelists think about that.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear it too. But Webster, and we'll ask that question. But one person I noticed in the gallery today, sitting in the last row behind the defense, was Special Agent, FBI Agent Pat Sanford, Webster. And I got to tell you, a couple of days ago, maybe it was last week, I was on the elevator with him, and that guy turned. I've shared this story before. He turned to us and said, "Thank you for everything you've done for the Markels," which absolutely took me by surprise. But I mean, Webster, just speak to the commitment of law enforcement in this case, but also, I mean, this is personal to Agent Sanford. This isn't just another case for him.
Yeah, I want to agree with John. I thought that was a compelling argument that Jackie made, and when she counted off year after year, 15, 16. I mean, that was very compelling. But obviously this is sequential. Yeah, for me, I think why I struggle so much with this case and why it's so personal for me is when doing this job, we see a lot of tragedy, we see a lot of stuff, people make horrible decisions, that kind of stuff, whatever. Normally you can kind of understand how we got there. You can kind of somehow, some way make some sense of it. And with this case here, I have permanent cognitive dissonance. It doesn't matter how long I live. I will never, ever, ever be able to come to terms with this really happened. And so I just, because it's so absurdly senseless and mendacious, and I mean, think about it. I grew up in South Florida. Charlie Adelson had a house in Fort Lauderdale on the Intercoastal with a boat. I mean, and the dude, fancied himself a gigolo and Ferraris, and he's in confinement in South Dakota now. He threw all of that away for this. And so I think that's, I'm going to speak for Pat, Agent Sanford, but for me, that's why I can't have any peace with this, and I never will, because no matter how hard I try to just accept that it happened, a part of me always kind of goes back and doesn't want to believe that it really happened. And I feel like I've been on a hamster wheel, literally, for 11 plus years of just torturing my mind with how did this happen? How did this happen? I mean, and you just go down the line. I mean, they're well-heeled professionals in Miami, with the tiger by the tail, and they murdered the greatest father that I ever met, and that's the truth. It's not hyperbole. I'm not saying it because Dan's not here. Those boys were all he cared about. I mean, it was just, he was, I remember now, he would go almost daily when they were at school, he would go almost daily to sit with them and have lunch. He wanted me to push for leave of court to amend the agreement so that he could just go to Wendy's house when the children were with Wendy for 5 minutes every night and kiss them goodnight and tuck them into bed. He would have given them every penny if he could have had that. I mean, he wouldn't have fought over the money. He would have paid them double what they said he owed if Wendy would have agreed to that. I told him I never thought the judge would agree to it, so it wasn't even something I was going to broach. And so these people took that father out of those boys' lives, but yet they claim to love those boys more than anything. And so, like I said, every time, everything about this bumps up against each other and nothing makes sense. And I can never come to terms with it. And maybe that's why it's this way for Agent Sanford. I don't know.
Yeah. Good point. Joe Patuto, and then we'll get to Betsy. And I know you guys have very busy days. And if anyone has to bounce off, talking about cognitive dissonance, I'm hosting a show that I don't really feel like I'm part of. So if anyone has to bounce, just let us know. But Joe Patuto, there was a moment in Georgia's close, not the rebuttal, but her closing, where there was an objection and Judge Stephen Everett got involved and there was a sidebar. And one of the issues was that Donna took the fifth. She ended up not testifying, Joe, when we thought that she would testify. Look at Steve Cohen bringing me pizza, bring me healthy food, soda, pizza, and this is what we eat on the road. This is why I'm diabetic.
Great job, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Steve Cohen. So Joe Patuto, I mean, there was a moment in the show. Imagine I'm on CNN and Steve Cohen delivers pizza. I mean, this is why CNN sucks and podcasting is so much better. No offense to CNN, but Joe Patuto, the judge talked about, Jackie made the objection, and there was a talk about, the right to not self-incriminate. And I guess Georgia came close in Jackie's eyes to crossing that line of letting the jurors in on the fact that she decided not to testify. From a legal perspective, that's a very slippery, dangerous slope for any prosecutor to go down, correct?
Yeah, well, you're not allowed to comment on the fact that the defendant didn't take the stand and have the jury draw a negative inference that she didn't take the stand because she was guilty. And what Georgia did was refer essentially to the absence of evidence in the defense case. And that's putting you pretty close to the line, because she started it out saying the defense has no obligation to do anything. It's all on us. But then she alluded to holes in the defense case in a way that could be heard to suggest, to move towards Donna didn't take the stand. And that's what led to the objection. I thought the objection, you shouldn't be objecting during your adversary's closing, but I thought that objection was appropriate. I don't, and certainly preserving the record for appeal on that was important for them. I think, and I'd have to sort of remember because I didn't get a chance to go back and listen again, what particularly Georgia said. At the time, it struck me that she was on the right side of the line, but I think the idea that she was getting close was probably accurate.
Yeah, I mean, it was jolting. I mean, Betsy, were you surprised in that moment? Because there was an objection, there was a sidebar, and then there was a break, and I feel like that really slowed the flow, if you will. There was only a few minutes left. I mean, it seemed, as a journalist who's a storyteller, if someone interrupts, or let's say I have really staticky reception and no one can hear me, this sort of ruins the show a little bit, right? So, you think that was disappointing to Georgia?
I mean, it definitely broke up the momentum, because she was rolling right towards the end. But I agree with Joe. I think it was probably the appropriate objection just for preservation of the record. But Joe said something on the program today, how unusual that is to happen once in a trial, but in this one it happened in both.
Yeah.
So, but to me, it was just kind of more of the same. Like this entire trial, I feel like has been broken up into little pieces, and we're waiting and there hasn't really been a flow. There really hasn't been a momentum. But I also started to sense that Georgia might have been getting a little tired towards the end. Her voice was straining. Maybe it was good for her to get a little break, to have a sip of water or something, and just a breather. But yeah, I mean, I agree. It's a problem when you're in a flow and you're doing it, you're wrapping it up, and then you get kind of knocked off your game. But she came back and recovered, and I thought she did a brilliant job.
Yeah, I agree. Tim, one of the interesting things with the defense is they did not hesitate at all. I mean, Jackie blatantly threw Charlie and Wendy under the bus and reminds the jurors that Luis Rivera, your friend Monica Jordan's client, that he never mentions Donna. He only mentions Wendy. He mentioned Wendy by name this time around. What's going on there? Do you think that Jackie got some advice from her client and who said, you can throw my daughter under the bus? What was happening behind the scenes reading between the tea leaves there?
I think that's true, and I loved how the state opened there with Spider-Man. Remember pointing that graphic of Spider-Man pointing. I thought that was really well done. It's kind of a little comedy, which is always good in a closing. They were pointing the fingers at everybody, and I think Georgia hit it right at the end. She said they're pointing at everybody. Charlie did it. Wendy probably did it. All these people did it, but not me. But then she came back and said, who had the most motive? Was Donna. Donna was the one that really wanted it more than any of these people she's pointing at. And I do want to say Sanford came in today, and I will tell you, a lot of people don't know Pat that well, but if there was an FBI agent that you would like to have solved this case and do what he's done, you would be Pat. He's a career public servant. He's come all the way up. He's true blue FBI, very serious, very ethical, and I'm happy for him because he did an awesome job in this case, and he helped solve this murder. And I think he testified well. I think he did well on the stand, and not all FBI agents do.
Yeah, we're going to go just a few more minutes, and then we'll wrap, and then we'll be on Full Verdict Watch the minute we get any news. I'll be tweeting it out on Twitter at PodcastSTS, on Instagram at Surviving the Survivor. But John, you brought this up earlier. Jackie also took not unveiled shots at the most sympathetic witness of the trial, without a doubt, who was Rob Adelson, and basically said, cast him as the one separating himself from the family, sort of not the other way around, and making him out to be a villain of sorts. You did it with Pat Sanford too. He's a very likable law enforcement. Lawyers always go after law enforcement, agents and officers, but to go after Rob Adelson, who had the courage to get up there, and I think everyone saw that across the board, Was that a fatal flaw by Jackie Fulfer? Was that a bridge too far?
I don't know if it was a fatal flaw. It was a flaw. And it was very short sighted on her part because Rob he was there um, not willingly. He did not want to be there. He looked like he would have rather been anywhere else but there, as opposed to Bailey, who relished the moment to be there and got paid handsomely for it, I assume. But Rob he was such a reluctant witness, and he was very credible. And for them, basically, the shot she took at him was he doesn't visit his mother enough. Like he didn't visit his family. It was ludicrous. I mean, there were many other avenues that she could have availed herself of, and she did avail herself. Jackie did of many of those avenues, but to go after Rob, I think, was a mistake. But the irony here is that aside from Donna's own words, what's going to get her convicted are her own two children, not Charlie, because he didn't testify, but Wendy was very damaging to Donna in this trial. Wendy was very, very indulgent of the prosecution and of their theory, much more so than she had been in prior cases. And Rob was brutal for his mother. What he said, what he testified to, is extremely powerful. I'd be very surprised if the jury was not glomming on to that testimony. So ultimately, her undoing, she fancied herself as the best mother and grandmother in the world, and her undoing will be two of her three children.
Hey, Joel. So I had like a hearing at lunchtime today, so I had to work through it, and my wife was actually working on the case with me. So we had a very late lunch, and we were at the restaurant when Jackie was making that argument, and we actually had the phone on, so we were listening to the closing. And my wife was so offended by that when she said those things about Rob. I didn't see his testimony, but my wife said, you could tell he was pained just to be there. Like he was in pain just having to be there. And so my wife's instincts are good. I'm telling you, man, I've done this long enough. One time I didn't listen to her, and I kept somebody on a jury that I shouldn't have kept, and they almost hung my case. And I promised myself I would never, ever not listen to her, trust her instincts again. So it really offended my wife when Jackie went down that road.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, because I think it was pretty offensive. John Singer, back to you on these so-called character witnesses who were straight out of like either a Coen Brothers movie or a Woody Allen movie. I'm not sure which, but these obnoxious Queens, New Yorkers getting up there talking about how they made all their money in real estate. I mean, what benefit did any of those people add to the defense's case? I mean, I thought they just all played into George's hand.
Well, I think they engendered comic relief in all of us who were watching. But I think that, look, I mean, they were central casting. I mean, Joel and I can say it because we're two Northeastern Jews, and two things that all of us have in common. One, we cannot pour concrete, and two, these people were like our grandparents. I mean, they're like your grandparents, and they were the defense really, really was troubled by Vietnam. They put on two witnesses in their defense case to talk about Vietnam. Three. One was Ann Cunningham, who talked about how they never would not have come back for the bat mitzvah. Then they had Chagrin, who testified that he was just helping them because they were technologically unsavvy and they intended on coming back. And then they called her lawyer to testify that there was no warrant and she was in a bad place and they needed to get away. I don't know, why didn't they go to Key West as opposed to some country that didn't have extradition? But they were really worried about Vietnam. And that's why they put those witnesses on. And they did no help. I mean, they were not helpful at all for the defense. It was a waste of time.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, now I have the cleaning crew behind me on top of everything else. But next they're going to sweep me out of here. Here comes the garbage man. Thank you. But Betsy, to you, they tried to play it off as though it was a mental health trip, like to a spa to get away for a couple of days. You're going literally across the globe. I personally think that is going to fall completely flat. And for as long as Webster says he's going to have cognitive dissonance, which is forever, I will forever just be in disbelief that a family with this kind of money was at the end of the day probably too frugal to pay for a round trip ticket. So they got this one-way ticket that just screams consciousness of guilt. I mean, there's no way they're getting out of that by someone on the jury now saying, "Oh yeah, they decided to go to Vietnam for just to relieve themselves, get some mental health reestablished in themselves."
Yeah, I think they almost would be better off just saying, look, she purchased this trip to Vietnam because she was scared. She saw what happened to her son. She knew they were coming after her. She knew she was innocent. She was terrified. And so they did a foolish thing. I think that would have been at least an understandable argument. But what they asked this jury to do is ignore your eyes and ears and believe our friends, when even though they're saying something completely nonsensical. You can't unremember the phone call, the drop call thing from the jail. You can't unremember the fact that they were specifically talking about non-extradition countries. I mean, that doesn't have anything to do with a spa. But then you've got Mr. Chagrin saying, well, it's a beautiful country. They have good food. That's the reason they wanted to go. And so I just felt that was insulting the jury's intelligence at that point, and really just wasn't even worth it.
Joel, how do you explain she was going to kill herself because her son got convicted? Right. Why was she going to kill herself and Harvey going to kill himself because her son got convicted of murder?
Mother's pain.
Great. I mean,
well,
Tim,
she still had grandchildren.
Yeah. I mean,
her
Tim, yeah. And Tim, I mean, directly to that point, again, you and Singer and Webster and Betsy are in these courtrooms every day. Walk us through what's happening in the jury room right now where they're deliberating. I mean, are they having these conversations right now? They picked a jury for a person who's going to be this either sprinkler man, or there's another person we think might be the jury for person who's in the front row who's very attentive. But are they saying that? Are they asking these questions? Are they saying, why on earth would she have reason to take her life if she wasn't guilty of something? It was her son that got convicted, not her. What's happening in there right now?
Well, first, they're picking a jury. Second, they're picking dinner. That's the reality. And they're going to use the bathroom, and they're going to want to know how long we're going to be here, because that's going to decide what they want to order for dinner. But
what did
you're
jurors
right.
get for dinner? They order pizza?
They might get sandwiches from Metro Deli, or they might get pizza, and the sheriffs will go pick it up for them.
Jansen, no offense, I don't want to sound like Donna right now, but Tallahassee pizza ain't New York pizza.
Oh, come on. Ahead. You haven't been to the right one.
Yeah,
no, you're right. I mean, you're going to have jurors, and you'll have questions, and sometimes you see these questions, and you're like, who are these people? What did we do? We completely failed in our case. They're asking that question that was answered 12 times, and you just don't know what they're going to ask. And usually when they ask the question, it's because they're having problems within the jury figuring it out, and they can't convince the others, so they want the court to fix it. So that means they can't come to a consensus. And
they could have one juror who insists that she heard one thing, and the only way they're going to resolve it is go out and have the judge read them testimony again.
They're probably going to have questions about the law. That's what they're going to have. Yeah. They're going to have a question about, what does this mean? How do we interpret this? And he's going to say, you have the instructions. They've been read to you. You have all the evidence, because he doesn't want to get reversed by messing with the instructions.
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb and say I don't think there'll be any questions.
Wow.
So I may be the one who's proved
you
wrong first.
You're on a short limb.
Really? hey, John Singer, one of the other things, Jackie brings up the push. She kind of pushes back on the whole bump, and she says that the FBI tried 5 times to get Donna to pay. And Fulford's quote, and I quote here directly, "Why in the world would Donna tell them to go to the police if she was guilty?" My question is, why didn't she go to the police? Was Fulford just trying to spin some yarn there?
Yeah, I thought that was idiotic, because Donna taped the call. I mean, obviously the FBI, obviously the bump man taped it as well, but Donna taped it. So everything she was saying on that call was super circumspect and very rehearsed, and she wasn't going to incriminate herself at all. So I question the wisdom in playing that call. But, one thing to pick up on what Tim said, which is interesting, is, we all know the case really well, and we assume the jurors were listening with rapt attention, but they may be banding about things that we haven't thought about, or they may be focused on things that we're not focused on. So, Joel, you've always been very focused on the one-way ticket. Your mom's always been very focused on Harvey having to be a part of it because there's no way they would have left him out. Tim is very focused on the VIN number and the license plate number. We're all very focused on certain, and I mean that in a way that certain things hit us differently.
Yeah.
Right? Betsy and Stephen, haven't been on with as much, so I don't know
Yeah.
what your hot buttons are, but that something that we may not be thinking about, they may be, one or two jurors might be focused on. It's just things hit everybody differently. And that's what the beauty of a jury is. They come from different backgrounds, socioeconomic, different genders, different upbringings, and they're going to bring different life experiences to the table, and certain things that may have gone over one person's head may not go over the other. So you're going to get hopefully a lot of good back and forth. And hopefully I think Joe's right. I don't think there's going to be questions. I'm going to go with Joe on this one.
Two limbs.
That might be wishful thinking. And very Pollyanna. But hopefully they'll debate it and they'll come to the right decision.
Joe, by the way, that was Singer's tactic in law school. He kisses up to the professor, brings an apple, goes with, and that's why he did so well at the Georgetown Law Center. Stephen Webster, one final question, then we'll get final thoughts about whether we'll get a verdict tonight or not. But one of the things that really rubbed people the wrong way, and you're the perfect person for this question, is from day one on openings, and I know you couldn't pay attention because you were a witness in this, a potential witness in this case, never called, but Jackie Fulford sort of appropriated the name Danny and was calling him Danny. And from day one, Tim Jansen said, they need to go to Georgia. They should be referring to him as Professor Markel or Mr. Markel. But she was calling him Danny in closings today. And then even went so far as to say that Donna would bake this banana bread, quote unquote, the way Danny liked it with chocolate chips. So really trying to enamor the jurors to Donna being this grandmotherly figure, and going so far, the government casting her as the mastermind of this murder, and the defense attorney is literally referring to the person who was murdered by his nickname Danny. I mean, do you find that offensive?
Yes. I heard it. I didn't like it at all when I heard her closing today. I heard that very line you're talking about. And I just thought it was grotesque. I mean, Tim, imagine.
What do you think Hankinson would have done?
Or I was going to say Hinkle. Man,
Hinkle.
Hinkle, yeah.
One of my very good friends from law school. Just when I started my firm, he represented the tax collectors, and one of them was being sued. It was in 1983, and he asked me if I would handle it with him. So we were in trial, and he had never done any litigation. And so he was like, I want to do a witness. And I said, okay, so get up and do this witness. He got up and called her by her first name. Hinkle almost came off the freaking bench and physically assaulted my friend.
It was federal judge Hinkle.
Surnames, Mr. Qualls, surnames. And so I just thought it was so grotesque. And then my wife told me that she had been doing that basically the whole trial, calling him Danny. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know where you get off, to talk like a concrete construction guy with the chutzpah to get up there and call him by his nickname Danny. I thought it was grotesque. I don't know how the jurors would feel.
She's got to be one of the
only grotesque, but you try not to find things they're going to tee off a juror or two in the wrong way. And that was a gratuitous one. I mean, there wasn't any reason why she had to do it. And there's a risk that you're going to get people on the jury who are really offended by it. So I thought I agree with you, Stephen, and everybody else who said it. I thought it was terrible, but it was also seemed to me to be really not smart.
Yeah. It was nauseating. And I got to say, she's watched enough trials. I put her as probably the quirkiest trial attorney that I have ever seen in court. When she first started her closings, I was like, this is a disaster. But somehow she sort of was able to bring it in. Also in person, I don't know if it's the pitch or what it is in her voice, but it is like nails on a chalkboard, and literally people like look away. It's like a high pitched frequency for animals. Like my dog would have been twisting its head. But Betsy, thank you for being here. Betsy Burgess, relatively new to the show. She is awesome. She's been hanging with us through thick and thin, good audio and bad audio, mostly bad. But Betsy, your final thoughts. You don't, well, I don't know if you were with Singer in Kissing the Professors, you know what, to suggest that there would not be a question. But do you think there'll be a jury question? Do we get a verdict tonight? Your final thoughts.
Be a jury question that the judge will answer. There may be a question. I don't know what it would be, but I don't think it will be very substantive. If that, the judge can't fix it. The jury's got to figure out the evidence on their own, and the judge can't help them. But my final thoughts, are you ready for my final thoughts?
Yeah, please.
Donna, honey, you're going to prison for murder.
Mm.
That's my final thought. I mean, I've watched the whole trial. I think, Georgia and Sarah Catherine Dugan did an amazing job. I think Jackie kind of finally found her footing today, but I think it's too little too late. And there were too many unanswered questions and conveniently skipped over facts that the jury has questions about. And Donna didn't testify to answer those questions. So, yeah, I think that's the outcome we're going to get. And I don't think it'll be tonight. I think this jury is going to deliberate appropriately for the magnitude of the task they've been handed. And so I'm thinking it'll probably be tomorrow.
Interesting. We'll be here. And by the way, we're going to keep the Verdict Watch stream, which is the other stream, going because people want to chat in there, and you're free to hop in and chat. Stephen Webster, as my mother would say, is a gentleman and a scholar. He had a job that Singer and I will never have, concrete pourer, and I'm pretty happy that I will never have that job. No offense to Webster, but Stephen, do you agree? Will we get a guilty verdict here? And also, I know you're not there, but you've got clients who've gone from jail to prison. What do you think that transition is going to be like for Donna Sue Adelson if she is convicted?
I mean, I have to believe she's going to be convicted. I mean, look, I was on 2 juries before I went to law school, and juries are weird. So I'm never going to sit here and speak in absolutes about juries, but I feel comfortable, and I know even though I didn't watch. I mean, I just know the kind of work and that Georgia and Sarah Catherine do. So I'm betting on those 2 horses every time. I would have to agree with Betsy. I think it would be, if they come back with a verdict tonight, I mean, it's guilty, and they're doing it as a straight up kind of FU to Donna and the Adelsons. I think most juries would want to make sure that they at least gave the appearance that even if they all went back there right now and they all were leaning guilty, they would say, well, we kind of owe it to the system to sit down and really kind of go over the evidence. But I mean, it wouldn't surprise me to have a verdict before lunch tomorrow. And I can tell you, nothing inspires a verdict like 4:00 on Friday. So I'm confident of that.
Yeah, we've heard that before. No one wants to go through the weekend. John Singer, do you, we've got one scholar who's Joe Patuto, and then you got, let's call him the brain, John Singer. Do you, I have this sense, John, that this jury convicted Donna after Rob Adelson's testimony. My gut tells me they just don't like Donna, and they especially are not fans of Jackie Fulford. Do you trust your gut when it comes to when you're looking at these juries in your time as a defense attorney? And what do you think? Does a verdict come back tonight, tomorrow? Any chance it comes back next week?
I think that I'm going to have to defer to the professor one more time because what she said earlier today during the live coverage was exactly right, which is you're confident, but you never know. And the waiting is so torturous because you just don't know what they're going to do we all know what happened here. We all know what the right verdict should be. And I think it will ultimately be a guilty verdict, but it's certainly very nerve-wracking. I think for optics purposes, they will take until tomorrow, even though they may have made up their mind. I think that they want to show that they put in the time and they had enough instruction that they're supposed to deliberate in all due course and supposed to contemplate the evidence. And there's a lot of evidence that was adduced, a lot of exhibits, a lot of phone calls, a lot of transcripts, a lot of phone records, SunPass things that aren't that relevant here, but still, there's a volume of evidence that has to be looked at. And I think they're going to take their job seriously the way you've described them, Joel and Tim. You've described them as very diligent jurors who are paying really close attention. So you think you would think that would translate into them deliberating for at least for optics purposes until tomorrow.
Yeah, well said. A huge thanks to John Singer, Betsy Burgess, Stephen Webster, but the MVPs of this gavel to gavel coverage, without question, have been Tim Jansen and Joe Patudo, the famed Tallahassee criminal defense attorney, and the high priestess now of STS. Tim Jansen will give the woman the final word because I have
Right.
2 daughters and a wife and a female boxer that I have to answer to. So, Jansen, do we get a verdict tonight? Your final thoughts? It was a long day. Feels like it's been a long life. But what about this?
I think there'll be multiple questions.
Mm,
I think the verdict will be before noon, or might be a mixed verdict tomorrow evening.
interesting. And we
I
say
think count
mixed.
one. I think count one is going to be problematic.
Mm, mm. First one to say it, and you're saying it late in the show. How come? Elaborate.
I think that they made enough hay, and there's not a lot to prove what Donna did before the murder. And I think a couple of those jurors might be confused as to principal theory, and they don't know the case like we do, you know. And I just think I think there's going to be questions on that.
Tim Jansen, get ready for your hate mail. It will be
Oh,
flowing
I
in.
know.
It's already
Bring
in
it
your
on.
it's
Bring it
already in
on.
your inbox, but that's your problem, not
But if
mine.
I'm right, they should give me kudos too.
Yeah, correct. You're going out on a limb, so you deserve credit. I can no longer read, by the way. I did have 20/20 vision 2 years ago, and whatever the exact opposite of 20/20. Singer, what's the opposite of 20/20? Like 480, 410 or something? That's what I have.
Now you're way
Blindness.
Oh,
40, 40.
blindness. Joe Patudo, you're now the high priestess of STS. You keep elevating every day.
I think sainthood is pretty high. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess sainthood is pretty high. Your final thoughts, Joe. We're going to get a verdict tonight, and just if you're the professor, how do you close out this class?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how long they're going to be deliberating tonight, so I can't answer whether it will be tonight. I think it will be before the weekend. And I'm going to close it out a different way. Jackie, at one point in her closing, against the law, and I hate it when lawyers do this, but she suggested that you could only have one person convicted of each one of the crimes. And Georgia on rebuttal said, that's not true. And then she went through and she started with Luis, and she did Sigfredo, and she did Katie, and she did Charlie, and she's going, they're all guilty of the crime, and she did Donna. And I swear to you, I thought she was about to say Wendy and stopped. So that's my final thought.
So now that you ended there, I've just got to go super fast around the horn. Betsy, do they arrest Wendy next? Yes or no?
Yes.
How soon?
Maybe a week.
Tim Jansen, you're the one that's going to have to be one of the people that lets me know. Do you agree with Betsy? This is kind of crazy now.
What did she say? When?
Within a week, they arrest
Wendy.
Wendy.
Within a week. I think there's a lot more evidence came out in this trial than I've seen before. And I think it looks like they're pointing the daggers right at Wendy. No, I don't think it's going to be in a week. I think maybe before Christmas.
If it happens tonight, Jansen, you better let me know. Webster, does that happen? Does Wendy get arrested? Is that how this Shakespearean tragedy ends? Is that the final chapter?
I believe Wendy does get arrested, indicted, but I think probably 3 months is what I would say is the outside, but taking it to the grand jury, unless she buys a ticket to Vietnam.
And Webster, on that note, is your friend Pat Sanford, has he got eyes on her, have his people in either Colorado or Texas watching her?
I have to believe they are watching.
John Singer, I used AI yesterday, and it told me it would take somewhere between 6 and 8 days to paddle from Miami to Havana at 6 to 8 knots an hour. I don't know if Wendy's in shape to do that. I would probably die before I couldn't see the shore in Miami anymore, or well, I could still see the shore. Does Wendy get arrested, John Singer? Whatever you say is what the truth will be, and if so, how soon?
I think so. I mean, did you hear what Georgia said in the one line that she said that had to give Wendy a lot of pause when she said, and I might be misquoting, but it was something along the lines of, "We're here to make sure that everybody who participated in
That's
this
right.
murder is brought to justice."
She did.
There you go.
However much Pepto-Bismol they sell at a singular Costco is not enough. She's going to have to go to several different Costcos, and I am nauseated for her. And on that note, we will say, love you, America. Love you, Tallahassee. Justice for Dan Markel. Love these guests. Love, I always say, best guest, better community. Everyone has been amazing throughout this coverage. Again, we're keeping open, as far as I know, the verdict watch stream because people want to hop in there and chat. Maybe Tim Jansen will hop in there at some point. Maybe Webster will hop in there at some point. Maybe Joe will hop in there. You never know who's going to hop in there. You can ask a question. Even the great John Singer or Betsy will get in there. We will see. We are redirecting now. It's literally just going to be a stream. But as soon as we get a verdict, Steve Cohen has walked by me 37 times. He's up at 3G waiting for the news. Follow me now on Instagram at Surviving Survivor and Twitter or X at Podcast STS. The minute we get word, I'm going to tweet it out and we will bring you live coverage. Thank you, everybody. Justice for Dan Markel. I appreciate you all. Usually I say goodbye to you, but since I'm on my cell phone, somehow I'm just clicking my ass out of here. See you guys.